So if you're one of the few people who didn't think that Tyrannid Crusher Stampede could be a bit problematic, let's talk about one damage combo so ridiculous that one model for less than 200 points could be doing over 50 wounds worth of damage to vehicles in a single turn. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought it'd be fun to look at one of the jankiest character combos to exist in all of 9th edition, a Hive Tyrant of Doom that would walk up to just about every normal sized threat in 40k and just kill it dead in a single round of combat, and one that seemed to have made such an impression on people that not just one but 3 people decided to send in to me saying that I should talk about it on the channel. I think it is kind of funny, and why just about no sane game designer would really want to have Crusher Stampede active at the same time as the new Codex Tyranids. Let's put the combo together and see how we reach around about 50 wounds in a fight phase. Then when we're done with that, we'll talk about how it's still pretty darn powerful even without the supplements, and why you're still likely to see a slimmed down version of this combo hitting the table. So first up, we're starting out with the Hive Tyrant. They're pretty threatening in the new Tyranids Codex. You can either take the walking one, which is cheaper, packs a second set of weapons like a heavy venom cannon, and has a fair bit more toughness. Or you can take the winged one. That one's nowhere near as tough and is a bit more expensive, but it's got far more mobility, 16-inch movement, and gets a few attacks from its claws and a reroll for its tail. They're fairly fighty just at base, strength 7 and 5 attacks hitting on 2s, and taking a bone sword and a lash whip at strength 10, AP -4 and damage 3. Already not too bad, and you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 with that lash whip. Hive Tyrants are pretty useful to have in the army anyway. You get a couple of psychic powers from them, a command ability. They're pretty hard to shift with 12 wounds and a 4+ invul, and they can be screened by Tyrant guards. Just at base, they'll do something like 3 dead marines, 10 wounds to a toughness 7 or 8 vehicle, or a little bit of damage to a hard target like a Plague Burst crawler. Not terrible even unupgraded, but with the Crusher Stampede and the Codex buffs, you can make things a lot more silly. First up, we've got the Rampaging Beast Warlord trait and the Aggressive Surge psychic power, both of which came from the Stampede, and they both added D3 attacks apiece. You've just taken your 5 attack Tyranid Hive Tyrant to a 9 attack one, and then to make those attacks hit extra hard, you take the Reaper of Obliterax, a relic bone sword that causes 1 extra mortal wound per successful wound roll, and with the accuracy and the strength that those attacks hit with, you're going to be getting quite a lot of those. Also, as a nice extra aside, you also get to ignore any abilities that would allow the target to ignore wounds, most commonly things like Feel No Pain, or certain powers like the Catan Shard of the Nightbringer, where you only take 3 wounds per phase. It adds up to around 9 attacks on average. Against light infantry, you'll be doing around about 7 mortal wounds, which is pretty crazy, and now your damage just from this alone adds up to 9 marines, 24 wounds to a toughness 8 vehicle, or 14 wounds to a Plague Burst crawler. However, again we can get far more scary. Next, if you were going to use some stratagems, there's 4 different ones on offer, 3 from the Codex and 1 Crusher Stampede one. Obviously 4 CP is a massive investment. You wouldn't have to use all of these if you thought you could just kill your target anyway, but you certainly could. The Codex ones that augment your attacks are Voracious Appetite and Adrenal Surge. Voracious Appetite allows you to reroll all wound rolls. That's going to mean that you're wounding just about everything the vast majority of the time, and more successful wound rolls mean more mortal wounds handed out. Adrenal Surge also gives you an extra D3 attacks, though you do need to take the 15-point Adrenal Gland upgrade for it. That'll also give you +1 movement and +1 strength. Sorry, not +1 to charge there, that's a typo. Finally, you could then combine the 2 impact hits ones, one from the Codex and one from Crusher Stampede. Trampling Charge from the Codex would average you just over 2 mortal wounds on the Winged Hive Tyrant, or just over 3 for the foot one with its horned chitin. And then there's that ridiculous Breaking Through one from the Crusher Stampede, which would usually average you around about 4 or 6 mortal wounds, depending on the toughness of your target and how many wounds you had remaining. If you put all of these crazy layered buffs together, then say you've got this Walking Hive Tyrant at 190 points, it's 160 to start with. I've upgraded him with a heavy venom cannon and also the adrenal glands. Stacking all the crazy buffs together, we've got 3 shots with the heavy venom cannon, 3 shots at strength 9, AP -3 and damage 4. Then the actual good bit in melee, with 5 attacks plus 3d3 more from the psychic, the warlord trait and the 1 command point adrenal gland strat, and they all hit on 2s, re-rolling 1s with the lash whip. They're made at the crazy strength of 11, AP -4 and damage 3, dealing 1 mortal wound per successful wound roll, and you can't ignore their main damage due to the Reaper of Obliterax, re-rolling the wound rolls with a Codex stratagem, and then finally around 6 to 8 mortal wound impact hits for another couple of CP. On average, the damage that this guy could do was truly ludicrous. Even with their new fancy armor of contempt, he'd on average kill around about 20 toughness 4 2 wound space marines, around half of them from your normal attacks, but a hefty chunk from the mortal wounds both from the impact hits and the Reaper. Against a standard sort of vehicle with toughness 7 and a 3 plus save, he'd average around about 50 wounds, 5 from the heavy venom cannon, 7 from the impact hits, 9 or 10 from the Reaper of Obliterak's mortal wounds, and then just under 30 from the regular attacks. In theory, you could push this insane number even higher as well, if you happen to be in the Tyranid Warrior's Synaptic Imperative for exploding sixes, and of course that makes things even crazier. If you did go fully at max in on the stratagems, then you could even do pretty meaningful damage to a really hard target like a Plague Burst Crawler. You'd average 31 wounds against them, thanks in no small part to the insane amount of mortals. Just for fun, I thought it could be interesting to see whether or not they could quite take out Mortarion in just one round. It turns out that even this roided out monster does fall a little bit short of that, mainly because Mortarion's often going to be using his Gloaming Bloat trait, and denying the wound rerolls on this combo is pretty powerful. Still though, you're really not all that far off, usually about 14 or 15 wounds in total, and if you did happen to be in the Tyranid Warrior Synaptic Imperative, then you could just about do it. It's probably the best for everyone that this guy's 3 or 4 day reign of terror has come to a very abrupt end, with Games Workshop stating that Crusher Stampede is no longer available for matched play. But regardless of that, I still think that Hive Tyrants with the Reaper of Obliterax really are going to be a terror on the battlefield. There's no doubt that you're taking a pretty hefty power nerf. You're losing 2d3 attacks from the Warlord trait and Psychic power, though it does mean that you can use that Warlord trait and Psychic power for more buffing ones now, maybe getting the most out of the Tyranids around you, or perhaps even just the innate 5 plus feel no pain ability. That certainly doesn't hurt. If you're just trying to absolutely max damage though, I guess you could play Behemoth, as well as an extra pip of strength that'll give you wound rolls of 6 causing 1 mortal wounds. You also only get the 1 copy of the impact hit stratagem. The big one where you'd usually get around 4 to 6 mortal wounds is now gone. Still though, I think he really is still quite threatening. You're only getting an average of 7 attacks, but you can still reroll wound rolls, and if you don't bother with the other mortal wound impact hits one, it only costs 2 CP rather than 4. If you throw this guy into most targets in the game, he is going to make a massive mess. You average 8 dead Space Marines with the new armor of contempt, still something like 24 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, or 14 wounds to a hard target like a Plague Burst Crawler, easily enough to kill the thing. The Reaper still makes it really quite nice against arcane hard targets with things like Feel No Pains, and caps on how many wounds you can take as well. And all of that's on top of the command abilities, psychic powers, and then depending on whether you walk or fly, you either get the Venom Cannon or the opportunity to overrun and escape. Talking of which, that is perhaps one of the scariest things that you can do with the Winged Hive Tyrants, and perhaps one of the reasons that makes the damage output that bit more meaningful. You don't get the Venom Cannon, but you trade it out for a couple of weaker Talon attacks, but at least you have a really quite a massive threat range of 16 inches plus charging, and then provided you do manage to kill whatever you did hit with the fairly ridiculous damage output, you spend 1 command point to overrun, and then you get to immediately normal move, hopefully escaping straight back to safety. Provided you finish your charge somewhere that's within 16 to 17 inches of somewhere that's relatively safe, you can basically jump your Winged Hive Tyrant straight back there, hopefully protected either by Tyrant Guard or behind terrain. I feel it does make Winged Hive Tyrants with the Reaper into just an exceptionally nasty threat. A really long threat range, massive damage when they get there, and then when they're done they just scoot straight off back to safety, hopefully somewhere where they're going to be far harder to counter-attack the next turn. Obviously that all does take a fair bit of command points, investment and a bit of forward planning, but Hive Tyrants still seem to be looking auto-include good to me in the new book. So anyway, hope you found this ridiculous but short-lived character combo interesting. I must admit I did enjoy running the theoretical numbers on it, even if Games Workshop has been fairly quick for them to put it out to pasture. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description. Channel patrons get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.